Hey everybody, last week I had a conversation with Kasey Reid on the Creatively Paid podcast. It was a really great conversation about how I got started, why it's actually great to start today, and how to use social media to grow your business. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Afterwards, go check out Kasey's podcast, and for now, just enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Creatively Paid podcast. Today we have with us Ran Segal. He's a really dope guy. He has done so many things so far in his 15 plus year stint with design and on his entrepreneurial journey as well. So today we want to just ask Ran a few questions and kind of get to learn more about him and his journey so far. So welcome, Ran. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, Kasey. Appreciate you having me on the show. Excited to be here.
No problem at all, man. So we know from if anyone has followed, if anyone follows you on Instagram or any of your social media platforms, they know a good deal about what it is that you do. But for those who don't follow you, Ran is a full stack designer, right? And he specifically works with early stage startups and with everything between branding, product design, video, and investor decks, and so on for this particular audience of people that he works with. I'm pretty sure he works with other people as well in terms of any of their design needs, but I know that is your specific niche, right? So with that, we really would want to know, how did you get started in design? And like, what was the early stages of Ran in design?
All right, so cool. I think it was just like a lot of other people. I like the phrase that you've mentioned earlier, like expensive hobby. I think that's what it was for me for a lot of years. I think I discovered Photoshop and all of these things back in high school, just kind of as a hobby, playing around with the graphic software and helping out all the people around me, friends, family, and just kind of started hustling, doing projects for everybody that needed them. Yeah. Like most people, low-paying projects, doing anything, whether it is flyers, logos, banners, whatever you need, I can do it for you. Because I download an illegal version of Photoshop, something like that. So kind of starting from the bottom, like I feel a lot of people would. But I was really passionate about this, and I started to as fast as I could. Found a full-time job doing graphic design. Again, starting from the bottom, but started doing banners and that kind of work as a full-time, and try to use every opportunity as a learning opportunity. So whether it is working in some kind of an agency or doing freelance project, use that as a learning. You learn new tools, learn new, better ways to work with clients, get feedback, always experiment, trying to bring more value to people, and slowly kind of built my way until I figured it out, which took a lot of time, probably more than 10 years before I could say, you started off by saying that I have a niche and I'm working with startups, but that was so well into it. I think it took me a lot of time to figure things out, which I think a lot of creatives do. I mean, for a lot of people, it's part of the journey.
Right.
I think when I started back in the day, there was no YouTube, Instagram, those kind of platform, podcasting to learn. So it was very, very slow learning. I think what I'm trying to share today, and so many other people sharing their experiences, I think today the learning can happen way faster. By having access to all these, learning from other people's journeys. So I respect what you're doing here, and hopefully it helps people kind of move forward faster.
Yeah. And you said something so key, and that is that now there's just so many resources, so many stories that we can learn from. So like, if you're starting design today, I would dare say that you can be a better designer in like about 6 months, as opposed to someone who started 10, 15 years ago, and the 6 months that they would take, because there's just so much. There's so much resources for free So yeah, like
free resources. The tools have gotten better
Yeah.
and easier. There's so many tutorials, so many resources. So yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I started, the technical learnings that I did were from lynda.com tutorials back at the time before YouTube had it for free. You had to kind of order DVDs and that kind of stuff. But then I went the more traditional route of going to like a full-on 4 years of design school. And I think even though I got a lot from, going to design school, I think all of that could now be crammed into so much faster, cheaper way to educate people and give them the opportunity to, experience all these things. So yeah, I think people who are starting out today, I think they're very lucky because they have access to all these resources. I think they're also kind of might be more intimidated because now they have access to seeing all these other talented, successful people, and it might scare them away a little bit or kind of be overwhelming. Like, oh, I'm just starting on. My crappy work can never compete to that. Back when I was starting out, if you wanted to see a good designer, you'd have to go to the library to pick up a book. And if you wanted to compare yourself, you'd have to really work very hard to do that. Otherwise, you'd compare yourself to the people in class, which are all, crappy like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people today have different struggles. But if you focus on the learning and less on the comparing yourself to other people, I think they're very fortunate and can move faster.
Right. Yeah. And you said something key just a while ago that really made me want to ask this question, and that is, do you think it's necessary nowadays for someone to get a degree if they wanted to work in graphic design?
I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a privilege. I mean, if you can afford it, if you can pay for it, if you can take 4 years of not, generating revenue, but, spending time learning, that's amazing. I mean, it's always, you're going to have an advantage, right? Because you're going to get maybe more practice and more feedback, and it's a privilege. I don't think it's necessary because I see amazing people who don't. I mean, I don't think the degree matters. It never did, especially in graphic design. People look at your portfolio. Nobody really cares what institution you went to. It's not like, Harvard Business School where some places, if you want to work in finance, that matters. In graphic design, I don't think that the degree matters. But what does matter is, how much practice you have and your network. So those are privileges. I don't think it's a must. I think if you can and you were interested, go do it. I mean, it's fun.
Right. Yeah. And it's so interesting because, like, for me, when I got started in design, funny enough, I got a degree in IT, specifically management information systems. And that I started graphic design while I was studying that in school. So just playing with Photoshop and then gradually, like, creating designs and flyers and so on and so forth for people while still in school. And same thing with photography too. I did that while I was in school. So, and from then it evolved into actually being able to get more clients and so on and so forth after school and being able to do that on the side. So, like, as you said, what really matters the most is your level of work and the portfolio that you have. For most people, when they're hiring someone.
But also, I have a question to you, which is interesting to me. Because I think usually nowadays everybody can have the same access to, let's say graphic design information. So what really comes into play here is what makes you unique. And I think that a lot of times it's the background that you have or what other skills besides the design it's being combined with.
Yeah.
So for you, in your example, you studied IT. And so you have different subjects, different expertise around different subjects, and also the people, your network, the people that you went to school with, the conversation that you had, your friends you had were from that aspect. So do you feel like that contributed to your, the route as a designer? Do you feel like having those skills in IT combined with graphic design has allowed you to solve kind of like different problems maybe? Or maybe it's just in my head. I don't know. I
would say, I think for sure, studying IT definitely helped because like in design, there is a very heavy technical aspect to it in terms of
Yeah.
learning Photoshop, and even when you get to the nitty gritty of understanding the system of design at times in terms of um like for example called again like the golden ratio and little things like that.
Yeah.
If you have a technical mindset, it's easier for you to understand the system of how that works and be able to apply that to your design. So yeah, I think for sure studying IT like really helped me understand a lot of concepts and definitely learn design software pretty quickly because I'm just used to being a technical person. That's not
Yeah.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah, like that for sure. I think that definitely helped, and I have seen that trend as well, where there are a lot of designers that if they didn't get a 4-year degree in design, they most likely studied IT or work in IT, which is
Yeah.
just interesting.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's really nowadays the kind of the gap between design and development is being, eradicated
Yeah.
because, designers also develop websites, and a lot of developers also have to sometimes design their own work. And so those skills are being used together, and I think that's for everybody's benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And which is good. It's good that we're able to get to that place of like having those skills combine a bit more. And it's also showing as well where especially when it comes to bigger projects and being able to do things pretty effectively and to create projects that really stand out. We're seeing two things. We're seeing the combination of the two in terms of really technical joining with design, as in programmers being able to design themselves, but also seeing a clear gap at times where there's really a need to just have a designer be able to design a website, design the brand, as opposed to having a developer do that as well. So, like in your opinion, when do you think is the best the best time for the separation of the two in terms of the technical and the design aspect?
Look, you know what? I want to answer you. I'll answer that because I was just reminded at the question that you asked me earlier, like even before we started recording. Like, how do you make that switch between design being your expensive hobby to something that can really generate revenue for you? And I think if you use this perspective, you can answer a lot of these questions. And the question about development is the same one. And to answer that, I would say, you need to understand that what you're doing here at the end of the day, no matter what your client is. So you might have different clients and each of them has different problems. Now, you need to think what is the most valuable thing you can do for them, okay? So with some clients, maybe they have their own developers. Maybe they don't need you to do development work, but the fact that you might have a certain skill might help you better communicate with their team. So that might be the most, I would say, profitable thing or way of conducting yourself. In other example, maybe they don't have anything, so they need you to kind of be that full stack person who can solve all of their questions and design and build at the same time. So the profitable thing would be for you to do both. So I think it's just, I always think that having extra skills is useful for you. You don't have to always use them, but you have to understand in the context of what do they actually need me to do right now. They might not always need you to develop, but does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure for those who are listening as well, that may be a question that they thought of as well. Because as we kind of lead more into like understanding how to become more of a valuable or high value designer, I think that's a key thing to understand. And that is like, if you want to be able to command more price or higher prices, you want to be able to easily handle more of the issues that the clients have and be able to provide more value.
And the higher level problems. Right. So when somebody comes to you with, I need a website, there's always a higher level need behind that. Nobody wakes up in the morning wants a website or a logo. There's always kind of an underlying need. If you know how to understand and solve that higher level need, maybe with a website and maybe with just something else, then they treat you as that business advisor, consultant, and they might have initially came to you for a website, but the conversation can change when you start digging under, and when they see that you can speak, and when you have the understanding of what the underlying problems might be. So I think, going back to the question of development, and now we're talking about, let's say, understanding what their business problems are. I think it's when you learn new skills, you develop new mental models. Okay, so you understand, let's say, in the world of, let's say, developing websites, how development work. Right? There's HTML that does this, and there's CSS that does this, and you host a website here. So you understand how all this works. Now, even if you don't use it, you can talk about this and you understand how these things work. The same with businesses. If you understand the mental model of how businesses work, right? So there's marketing, does the user acquisition, they're attracting customers, and then they're delivering a service, and then it creates revenue, and they can optimize, and how funnels work. These are, let's say, mental models for business. So when you learn more things, you learn to understand and have conversations around these mental models, and then you can start moving up the value chain, because you're talking about the high level things. So for that, you need to understand how to have these conversations.
So it's really good to really round yourself out as a designer.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why actually the reason that I was asking, about the IT earlier on is I'm not sure, I don't know what you learn in an IT degree. So I don't know if I even know the mental models in that workspace. And that's why I was intrigued by it, because every time, I learn something, whether it is development or business or marketing, you learn these concepts, and then you can have these conversations. And I'm actually curious, because I don't know what these conversations around IT are. I was curious about whether you learned it and if it's been helpful for you.
Right. And that actually reminds me of something, because with my degree specifically, it's a bit different from just a hardcore IT. Because it's called Management Information System. So with that, basically it's a business degree and IT combined. So we learn the core fundamentals of business and the core fundamentals of IT. Business, we learn a bit about marketing, a bit about business law, economics, stuff like that, business stuff. And then IT is the core of that. So a bit of networking, tad bit of programming, multimedia programs, stuff like that. So I think that as well, really, for me personally, gave me a very well-rounded view of how my designs help the client, as opposed to, I'm just gonna make a really nice flyer that's super cool and trendy. But understanding that, okay, if I ensure that this flyer, for example, that the title is the most important thing, or the ticket price is the most important thing, or the contact information is the most important thing, or that is seen first, then I know that I would have done the client justice, as opposed to being so caught up in the design that the actual design itself is the main thing that's seen, as opposed to the most valuable information, or the bit of information that will help with the sale or the acquisition, or so on and so forth. So yeah, I think,
but also you're designing this flyer. Why are you designing this flyer? Is this some kind of a marketing? They're trying to get someone to do something. What is that something that they're trying to get somebody to do? Is there another way, maybe a more effective way rather than flyer, to do this? Or, I don't know, you can have this conversation once you understand, how their business works and why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, man, because I know for new designers, that can be something that can be challenging, and that kind of dives into the business side of design, where we're not designing just for designing's sake or for the artsiness of it. That's not a word, but You know, like it's
Yeah.
not just about creating something that's beautiful, but it's about creating something that serves a need. Like graphic design is specifically that what graphic design is. It's about creating design, creating something that creatively shows or helps solve a problem for businesses or for anyone. It's not just art per se. You know?
So I totally agree, and
Yeah.
I also made the shift as I've mentioned in my journey. You know, when I started out, I thought that the goal of design is to make things prettier, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as I've moved along and I learned all these other stuff, now I'm like, yeah, I need to solve them a problem and so forth. But you know, following up on the conversation on the mental models, you need to understand how do you use design, right? So you have the tools that you have as a designer, right? Whether they are, you know, typography, hierarchy, image making, composition, all of these different tools that you have. First, you need to learn as the technicals of how to use them, so
Right.
that you can solve a problem. Because if you would, if I would go ahead and, have all these conversations about solving big problems for the clients and so forth, but I won't be able to use the craft itself, then, I won't be able to be a good designer. So the first thing is to master these tools, and then mastering them alone is not enough. It's probably going to get you to, you'll be able to work, but probably not make a lot of money. So
Right.
that's step number one. And everybody goes through the steps, right? Nobody starts at level 100. Nobody. You can try to get there faster. That's fair. But you need to understand everybody go through the levels. So first step, master the basic tools and frameworks and mental models of design. Understand all these concepts, hierarchy, contrast, message, even copywriting, right? We use so many words. So understanding how does communication works. You do that, you move into the next level, which is, okay, let's start to understand what problems does the client have? How do we communicate with them? How do we understand their problems? I think those would be kind of the steps on how to go about it.
Right. Yeah. And it's just so I'm glad that you mentioned those things, because it really does. That translates to so many. It's not just graphic design. That mindset
For sure.
translates to all creative work, because
Yeah.
like you have to, at the end of the day, if I'm gonna spend $5,000, $10,000 on a video or branding or any other thing, photography project, whatever it is, I know as a client, if I'm spending that money, I want to know that I'm gonna get a return on investment, or at least whether that is financially or foot traffic.
Yeah, perceived
or,
value. Perceived
Right.
value is, we pay for Nike or whatever. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily because we're going to get ROI, but we think it's worth it.
Right.
And that is a personal thing. That's basically essentially what's branding is a lot about, right? It's creating that perceived value.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, man. Like, and it's super important. It really, really is. So as far as we know, from what you have mentioned so far, like you kind of let us know how you got started and what that journey kind of looked like for you. So as you continued on and you started to like really find your footing, in design, how did you get to a point of choosing your niche? Because I know a lot of designers, we can
Yeah.
struggle with that. So you want to serve everyone, but you don't want to be serving everyone.
Yeah.
So
Right. So for me, it happened for me incidentally. It wasn't happening for me as I was looking for a niche. It just happened. But maybe that's part of why it took so long, because I didn't know I need to have a niche. So for many years, over 10 years, I would do work for anybody. And then for a lot of years, I would mainly have kind of a full-time job as a designer, but also do freelance projects. And when I did freelance projects, I basically did freelance projects for everyone. And that didn't progress anywhere. And then at my last job as, a full-time designer, I was working as a full-time designer in a startup. And I really got I really learned a lot about the inner working of a startup and all the mental models that we discussed earlier of what is a startup. What do they need? What the life cycle of a startup looks like. And that gave me a lot of advantage over a lot of freelancers who are just freelancers, but never saw the inner workings and never knew the lingo to use and all of that kind of stuff. So when I left that job, I kind of had an advantage. And so the everybody that I worked with since then has been, only startups, because I realized that's where I have an advantage, and I've been super focused ever since. And that created this kind of a cycle that, feeds on itself, right? Because if you only work with the same type of companies, then your portfolio is really focused. All your testimonials are focused. Everybody's referring to you to their colleagues who are in this industry. So that's kind of a very fast upward cycle where, just in the last 3 years of a freelancer, I kind of doubled my business every year. So that worked really, really fast. And again, it happened by accident. I didn't know this. Now, while I was doing this, I also learned business, and I was like, oh, so I picked a niche, but I didn't know that I need to do this. But that's where, learning from other people's experience comes into play, and that's what we mentioned earlier. I took a lot of time to learn because I didn't have direct people to learn from, okay? Because I didn't know anybody else who was doing this successfully that I could learn from. And so I had to do all of the mistakes myself, which is kind of stupid to do all the mistakes yourself, right? And and there's this thing that's called, survivor bias, okay? So most people don't survive, and then you hear only the people who are surviving, and they think they're oh so smart because they survived. But most people don't survive, right? So I'm one of the lucky few to kind of survive being out there so long and didn't shut my business. And I'm trying to, work backward to understand, okay, so this is what seemed to work. Can this help other people without being lucky as much as I've been lucky? And from what I'm seeing so far, it does work. Basically, by the way, because it's just a solid business principle. But again, I never learned business principles before I went on to become a freelancer. I just didn't know that's necessary.
Right. Yeah, and I really like what you mentioned before in terms of understanding how a particular industry thinks, in terms of how it works. I think that's a really key thing that applies to any industry.
Yeah, for sure. That's where I'm going crazy when people think that they can service everybody. Well, if you service everybody, then your expertise on the particular problems that they have are very, very shallow. You're never going to go very deep unless you choose to. I mean, if you focus on whatever gym owners or restaurant owners, they will have very, very specific problems and very specific ways of talking about the problems and their own language. And again, so if you want to be an expert, you can't be an expert of everything.
Right. Yeah. Which is very, very, very in this whole journey of being a creative.
The thing is, most designers are reluctant to make this kind of a narrow focus. A lot of times because they're like, oh, but I love working with, variety of different clients. I love learning about new industries. I love that. I don't want to just focus. I'll be bored. And this is, again, where we come back to your question, how do you make the jump from expensive hobby to a business? If you are interested in having a business that's a good, profitable business, then you need to do what's good for the business, not just what's good for exciting for you, all right? Maybe it's not exciting for you to look at finances every week or something like that, but it's required if you want your business to succeed to do whatever it takes. So understanding these principles and that, those are solid business principles, that you can't give good service or you can't be the best if you're trying to be the best for everybody. If you're unwilling to make, the tough choices, then you might be stuck at the expensive hobby phase.
Right. Yeah. And man, that's the goal particularly with this episode and with this podcast in general, for us to kind of get out of being a creative that invest so much in their equipment and all of these various things. You go and build your own computer, so on and so forth, and you spend all of this money, and you have the hope, the goal of being able to produce and make at least the money back and be able to make this a career for yourself. But we get stuck in that loop of wanting to serve everyone, wanting to just do this for fun, as opposed to understanding the needs and like providing value for people, like truly providing value for clients and businesses and for anyone that needs your work. So yeah.
I think, what gets a lot of people confused is there's a lot of the advice, the popular Steve Jobs advice. You got to do what you love. And if you wake up in the morning and you're not excited about what you're doing, then you need to be doing something else. I think that's where people are confused, because they're like, well, I love photography, so I'll only do photography. That's great. However, that does not ensure that you'll get paid. So you have to do what's required in the marketplace. And that's not necessarily 100% fun. So I'm not saying, do what you hate to make money. I'm just saying there needs to be a balance, and you need to realize that you're not in a fairy tale. You're in the real world where, you need to do what the business requires. And maybe your dream is to do, pink hand lettering, and maybe there's no market for that, or you're not going to make millions doing this. So maybe you're okay with that because you're doing it for the hobby. But if you want to, build your house with this, maybe you need to do something else. Yeah.
Yeah. And that reminded me of something that Gary Vee says a lot. And that is letting the market decide. The market truly decides what is needed, not you. Like, we don't get to decide what is great and what people want to pay
all right.
for.
So let me share a story. I have a story about that. So, I've been freelancing, and after I was working in startups, I kind of had this dream that I would start my own startup, like a software company, like a SaaS, software as a service. And I've been working, on this with a couple of partners for a few years, like 2 to 4 years. We've been working on this project, and it was okay. It wasn't like a complete failure. It was doing a little bit of money, but not enough to support us. But that was really kind of like my dream. That's what I wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I couldn't make a good living out of this. And, at the same time, I was doing YouTube videos for fun, just for fun. And that started to grow and grow and grow. And a lot of people were telling me, hey, Ron, how about you, just focus on making content and, do courses and help people and teach people. And I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. And then eventually, just as a test, I put out one course about, how to use Webflow. And this thing just exploded. And in 1 week, made more money than the other startup did after 4 years of us working on it. And so, I got a slap in the face from the market that's like, you can keep doing what you want to do, but the market doesn't want this. And there's something that the market really wants you to do. Are you not going to do this? So, I think you need to be, and sometimes I'm not saying it's easy to make this choice, right? I was there for 4 years trying to make it work and trying to not give up and all of that. But sometimes, the market will just tell you at the end of the day, but you have to be open to listen and do what works, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad that we got to this point, because that kind of leads me into the next a bit of questions I want to ask. And that many questions that have to do with when it comes to becoming a high value designer. And in this case, I would even substitute designer with being a high value creative. It is important for us to be able to master the aspect of business, this particular aspect of business, and that is marketing, right? So as a high value designer, what would you say is kind of the best ways to get yourself out there in terms of use with social media and so on and so forth? Like, what's some practical advice that you give for someone they're now like really good at what they do. They've probably got really great clients at this point. They're making like pretty decent money, but they want to be able to attract more ideal clients to them. So like, what are some things that they could do from a
All right.
social
So
media
the
perspective?
first thing is you need to make a dramatic mind shift about how you think about this, because we as creative people, we're being educated and being told over and over and over again that marketing is bad. Marketing is for sleazy salesmen. Don't market yourself. Don't spam. Don't like try to push yourself. That's bad. And if you just do good work, everything will be fine. If
They'll
if
come
you're
to
a
you.
good designer, things will, yeah, but that's not how things work, right? Because
Right.
there's gazillions of good people in the world, and clients don't know how to pick the right one for them. So you need to be able to communicate to them. So in order for clients to, hire you, they need to know you, like you, and trust you. Okay, so first of all, if they don't know you, you can't help them. So you're not doing any help to anyone by you just, being quiet and hoping that somebody might refer to you or drop into your Instagram profile or whatever, because it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you need to get people to know you. So that's thing number one. You need to change your mindset about marketing is not evil. It's something that you need to do in order to help people. Okay, you can't help people if they don't know about you. So this is point number one. Now, the second thing is, I think everyone is going to so I think there's also kind of a social pressure about how to market yourself. So right now, at least from me, because I'm active on Instagram, I feel like everybody's pushing everybody else to, oh, you need to be on Instagram, you need to post content, you need to gain followers, all of that kind of stuff. You need to disregard, the social pressure and just think what is right for you and what is right for your potential customers. So, if you're working with whatever, governmental agencies or nonprofits, and you're posting on Instagram, maybe they're not even on Instagram. So that's not really helpful. The second thing is you need to see what you're comfortable with, right? So the first content that I ever produced was blogging. So I started writing. And it was interesting. I think I learned a lot. I blogged 4 years every week, and I learned to write, which I think is also a very important skill. But it was really hard for me. So I did one post per week, and it was always like, for me, going to the gym. It was really hard. I didn't enjoy doing this. But then I was glad I did this because it had good, benefits. Then, one day I started doing YouTube videos just, after I was seeing Kasey Neistat, and I was kind of inspired by all the vlogging. I was like, oh, let me try to do like a designer vlog. And then I started doing this, and it was really fun for me. So I made, instead of one post per week, I did 5 videos every week, and it wasn't painful. It was fun. It was kind of like my creative outlet. So just by doing things, I realized what's my natural inclination. And I think different people have different inclinations. Some people are more comfortable writing. Some people are more comfortable talking. Some people are more comfortable on video. Some people are more comfortable in person. So you need to try different things and find what you're comfortable in and what's your, what your strengths are. You won't know this by thinking about this. You'll only know this by experimenting and just actually doing things. So I encourage you to try multiple things for a while and see what sticks. I mean, I wouldn't take a commitment that you're going to hate yourself after, like, oh, I'm going to start doing Instagram posts every whatever for a year now. No, just give yourself a challenge for maybe 30 days, see how you feel after that, then try 30 days of something else and see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's some really, really good advice. Because I know for sure, especially when it comes to the whole social media game, a lot of people get really overwhelmed because there's a lot of courses and so on and so forth, and people that give free information as well that tell you to just be everywhere. Like you got to be in Twitter, got to be in Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's like
this, I feel, I listen to Gary Vee as well, who tells you, you need to be on 7 platforms, but he forgets that, he now has a team and he's everywhere and it's easy for him to leverage all the platforms, and it's not easy. Actually, my recommendation would be the other way around. I suggest you try things first to understand where your strengths are, but once you make a decision, I would double down and try to be the best in that platform, in Twitter or in Facebook or in, because the way these platform works is, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? Like the top 20 accounts get 80% of the traffic or awareness, okay?
Right.
So if you are active on 8 platforms, but on all of them you're in the bottom 80%, you're getting 0. At least if you're active on one and you try to build it, and after a lot of investment, okay, it doesn't happen in a day, you get to the top 20 after 3, 4. Like, I'm active on YouTube. I'm posting daily for over 4 years now. And I think right now I'm in the top 20 of design YouTube. Okay,
Right.
so that's, let's say I won there. On Instagram, yeah, I've been active for a year and somewhat. And I'm leveraging the audience that I have on YouTube to grow on Instagram. So it's not like starting from scratch. So it's like a snowball.
Yeah.
Build one and then roll it to the next one instead of trying to start rolling, all of them at the same time. You're never gonna make much progress.
Yeah, like for sure. And yeah, I think it's really important, as you said, to kind of focus first, and kind of focus on, or focus where you can at first to get a better idea of what you're better at. And one thing I've learned as well is that as you get better with social media, you start to learn how each platform works. It's really easy to take the same content and tailor it for each platform. So like, you can create, like, one video can end up being so much content for all of these various platforms. It can be the same concept, it can be basically the same thing.
Yes,
but
for me, it's yes, but. I mean, that's what Gary Vee says. I know from my experience, like, when I take my YouTubes one-on-one, like, exactly, just edit them as an IGTV, they don't do that well, right? Because on Instagram, you need on Instagram, carousels do very well. Yeah. And you need to, it takes some work. You can take the ideas from a video and break them down as a carousel, but it needs some work as an adaptation. It's not as easy as, Gary Vee would show you, you take a screenshot of the tweet, you post it here, you post it there. Right. It's a little bit more difficult than that, I think. But it's true that, what I think? It's kind of like, how in design, when you're doing design, at the beginning you try a lot of things and then you narrow down. And then you try many things, and then you have these kind of process of narrowing down. So I think you should also do that in your marketing, right? You try a lot of things first, maybe different platforms. Then you make a decision where you want to narrow down. And then you narrow down, let's say you narrow down on Instagram. So maybe now you experiment with different things on Instagram. A video, a carousel, an image, an illustration, typography, whatever. You see what works. So in all the time you need to experiment, see what works, double down on that. Experiment, see what works, double down on that. It's kind of a process, I think.
Yeah. No, you are so right. And it actually reminds me of one of my first episode. Yes, my first episode. I was talking with a social media coach, and really really dope girl, man. And she explained basically that same concept of, like, you kind of try various types of posts first, and then you kind of double down after that on what really works the best. So you try various, like, 5 to things, different types of ways, whether it's carousels or video or just one picture of, or whatever it is, translating that to various a different social media platform, and then doubling down based on what really works. And I've definitely seen that for myself. How
what? I want to add something that I thought about now that we didn't talk, because it's true. The whole, I was thinking about the doubling down on what works is kind of like let's call it the scientific method, right? You look at the analytics. This performs well. This doesn't perform well. Yeah. So this is true, and that's also what I do. But one thing that I think is worth keeping in mind is that at the end of the day, you need to enjoy what you're doing and feel like it resonates with you. Because if you see something that works, but it's not really in line with who you are and what you want to do, you'll get really sick of doing this again and again.
Yeah.
All right. So it needs to be in line with stuff that you actually want to do.
Right. Like creating that balance. Yeah. Of like what works and what really sticks with you. Cause that's so important for social media. Because sometimes we can get lost in it because you have this goal of, I don't know, making a lot of money or getting a lot of followers. You can get consumed with what they want as opposed to what really resonates. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it kind of leads to, I feel this is happening, and I'm not saying I'm, not guilty of this, but everything starts to look the same because everybody understood what works and everybody's now doubling down on what works. So everything looks the same because everybody's doing what works right now. And then what's going to happen? People are going to get bored of this and it's not going to work anymore. So you always need to experiment. One last thing about the marketing is that I forgot to mention, I think it's important, is you need to remember who you're marketing to. So you're marketing to your potential customers. You're not marketing to other designers, which is a lot of times what happens on platforms like Instagram, where you're just trying to impress your peers and get a lot of followers, but that's not what's going to help your business. So I think it's important to be mindful of that.
Yeah. Like really knowing who you're marketing to. Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. Because at the end of the day, you want to attract the ideal person that you want to work with, your ideal client. Yeah. One thing as we start to wrap up, just two other questions I really want to ask. And one is, when it comes to marketing yourself, especially as a designer and one that wants to stick out, you want to be known as someone that is a high value creative, right? What would you say are some challenges that you face with developing your personal brand? I know you have you're an entrepreneur, so you have your own company. But in terms of developing brand, as in getting to know who you are, what are some challenges you face with developing that personal brand?
When you say personal brand, you mean what's on my website, or what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is mainly like how you are perceived from a marketing standpoint. So like, for example,
Okay, so let me try and understand. First of all, you need to realize what other people think of you, right? And it goes back to sometimes you don't know what your niche is or what your uniqueness is unless, you take stock of what happened, or go back and look at who your past clients are and see, oh, they all have something in common. And then go back to ask your clients, like, by the way, what was the most good thing? Like, what was good about working with me? It took me years until I asked that question. It's rather a simple question, right? And by the way, from a business perspective, think about any product that you bought. You always have kind of an end service, right? Did you enjoy this? Was it good? Was it bad? And I never thought about doing this as a business owner. Just like asking my clients, what was good? What's bad? What can be improved? And after talking to them, I kind of realized, so it's, how I work with them, how I manage the process, how they like working with me personally. So I understood, for example, that for me, the strengths of the relationship and the managing the project, the sessions, the collaboration was more important than the quality of the actual design work for them. So that led me to some breakthroughs and understanding about what's special about working with me and how I can communicate that and how I can better sell. Not everything is, when it comes to brand, not everything is just the website, right? It's about what experience, they have when they work with you. So yeah, I think those tools helped me to understand, and I'm always trying to learn and improve in general, kind of do growth work on myself by reading book, taking courses, all that kind of work. So I know that if I'm improving, the quality of my service improves, the quality of my work improves, so everything improves. So I try to invest in that, as in I can call this improving the brand, right? Because the brand is me, and so if I'm better, the brand is better in a way.
Right. Yeah, and I really, really like that answer, because that's something I've started to observe a lot, is how creatives kind of let who they are shine throughout their social media presence, as opposed to just the business of like, oh yeah, I do this.
Oh man, so many people miss this out. So many people think that clients come to buy their work. This is not what they're buying. They're buying working with you as a person. Everybody's hiring a person. They don't even know what's the difference between this photo or that photo, this logo or that logo. It all looks the same to them. Yeah. They're just picking up the person. So that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I would say that's probably one of the most important things. Really being, of course, being a good person, a decent person to work with, but allowing.
No, but you're probably it's. I'm not sure if it's helpful to say be a good person. I assume you're already a good person. You just need to show who you are and communicate that. That's all.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is, because if you don't, then people don't know. They don't know who they want to work with potentially, and it's so important to be able to like let who you are shine as well in your social media presence and in your market, because as you said, people are investing in you as opposed to just the work. You can have the best portfolio in the world, but if they don't like you, they're not gonna work with you.
For sure.
Yeah, man. Like, so far this episode has been amazing. We're starting to wrap up now. And I really hope that those who are listening to this episode or even watching this, that they learned a lot about like the journey of becoming a high value designer. And of course I can translate to being a high value creative as well, because there are a lot of things you want to bear in mind, and it's not just about transitioning from on day one from, oh, I'm making $50 for a flyer, to all of a sudden making $5K. Like, it's not magic, there is a process. There's various things you want to bear in mind, and Randy mentioned a lot of really great things in terms of like understanding the industry that you're working with, understanding the client, being able to provide more value, and then over time you'll be able to ask for a higher price based on the skill sets that you're able to bring. And so far I'm really glad that there are a lot of really, really good nuggets that we can learn from this episode.
Thanks, Kasey. It was such a pleasure, dude.
Man.
I really feel like it was a great conversation. A lot of times these, you don't take the time to think about them, but this conversation helps to put them in context. I love thinking about this with you.
Yeah, man. No problem at all. So as we wrap up, just want to ask you, like, is there any last words, any last bit of advice for anyone that's starting out as a creative? Like, anything that you would give them, any mistakes that you probably made that you don't want them to make?
So I think the number one mistake thinking is just being a good creative will be enough. Wrong. You need to invest in learning and understanding the business, and so always do the work to learn and try to be better, and then be patient, because as you've mentioned, these are steps. You want to take them step by step. Nobody's making that jump. While there are you can learn from other people's mistakes and get there faster, there is no like magic shortcut to take you from the zero to hero. You need to go through the steps. It might be painful. It might take a lot of effort. It's not easy, but it's definitely possible. And I hope my, learning from my experience can help you get there faster.
Right. Yeah, I really hope so as well. I'm pretty sure this episode is just packed with really, really good bits of information and nuggets that would really help a lot of people So yeah, I really would like for people to be able to find you, after they watch this episode or listen to this episode. So if you can just give us your website details, social media
So
handles.
yeah. So you can find me on YouTube. It's Flux, Flux, and on Instagram, Ran Segal. That's RAN Segal, SEGALL. That's where I post content, and yeah, you can check that out. You can check our school, Flux Academy, flux-academy.com. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'll have that link in the show
Kasey.
notes. Yeah, man.
For sure.
No problem, man. Thanks again.
It was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it much.
No problem. No problem at all.